Started in just 2 seconds. Great, thank you. So we were just waiting for a few more people to join in. Today is a webinar or a live consultation, which is part of a series of live consultations that IRMA has been organizing and hosting between December last year and continuing through January this year. And we've been covering a number of topics, sectors, mechanics, characteristics of the proposed new draft IRMA standard for responsible mining and mineral processing. And today's focus is on the management of physical stability, which is a new chapter that is proposed in the IRMA standard and therefore doesn't have a number yet, as you see chapter 4.x. If we go to the next slide, you'll see that the agenda for today I'll be reminding you about the house rules for today, and then explain how you can contribute live and direct into the revision process during this webinar. I'll be saying a few words about the IRMA revision process itself, and then I'll share with you an overview of the proposed changes for the IRMA standard to address this very important aspects on the physical stability of infrastructures and facilities. And then we'll have time at the end if there are more questions or recommendations or issues that we need or you would like to discuss. So the house rules for today, this event is hosted by IRMA, the Initiative for Responsible Mining Assurance. The event is being recorded. And as with all the other webinars and events that have been taking place, the recording will be made publicly available on our website, on our YouTube channel. If you have missed any topic, chapter, sessions that you were interested in, please feel free to go watch the replays. You can find them on our website or directly on our YouTube channel. I have to remind you today that you may not post any unlawful, offensive, threatening, libelous, defamatory, obscene, or objectionable content. Do not post or send or link any hateful, degrading, criminal, or sensitive imagery or content, nor advocate or promote intolerance or hate against other people. And I also remind you not to post or send any spam content today. I'm saying this largely because the chat function is open. Here it's enabled. Everybody can use it, and it's one of the communication channel that you can use today to contribute. So this event as a whole is one of the many opportunities and spaces that IRMA has created and allowed for all stakeholders and everybody really to contribute to the revision of the standard. That includes a dedicated online platform. If you haven't seen it yet, you can find it at responsiblemining.net/comments2, the number 2. And then we have these live consultation events. We've been, I think, very fruitful until now, I must say. You can use the chat function to share content with IRMA, with the whole audience at any time, but just noting that the chat cannot be used in an anonymous way. So if you share content, then your name will be visible. Unlike the Q&A function, which is the other feature that you can use today to submit comments, suggestions, feedback, questions, concerns, recommendations to IRMA. The icon is located at the bottom of your screen. And here there's an option that reads send anonymously if you don't want your name to be visible. With these two functions, chat and Q&A, please be assured and know that the content you're sharing today will be saved and considered by IRMA as part of the standard revision process. As with any other contribution that will be sent through other communication channels, and I'll be mentioning them later. So really feel free to start, using the chat and the Q&A if you already have questions, recommendations, either having read the draft standard already or having had experience yourself with the IRMA standard in its current form. We're really eager to hear from you on everything really. So the revision process itself, if we go to the next slide, IRMA has been conducting a comprehensive revision of the standards. So the IRMA standard for responsible mining, which is our main standard, the one that is in force, was published in 2018 or launched in 2018. So it's been more than 5 years now. Just about more than 5 years. And so doing this revision, it's been a sort of a continuous journey and process, but we've reached that point where everything is being boiled together, and that really allows us to ensure that the IRMA system, the IRMA standards remain accountable to all stakeholder groups, all sectors, that it remains up to date. It's also an opportunity for IRMA to add clarity where needed to make the standard clearer, more accessible for all, also more auditable. I'll say more about it later. It's a wonderful opportunity for us to add consistency between, the different chapters, the sections, the principles, make sure that we're also consistent in how we embed good management systems practice and sort of sound continuous improvement models throughout the standard. And it's also a great opportunity for us to fill gaps. So any environmental or social issues where, for example, the standard would have fallen behind over the last 5 years, or also a number of emerging issues where the IRMA board of director potentially could not come to an agreement 5 years ago on an emerging issue, and now it's more established and there's a consensus that this is significant and needs to be addressed. So these are the kind of examples where we're looking at to improve this standard. One very important thing with this new draft standard, IRMA is evolving to address more and to address key phases of the supply chain. So building on this 2018 IRMA standard for responsible mining that really focuses and only looks at the mining operations themselves. If we go to the next slide, you'll see that we did publish 2 draft standards in 2021 as a first attempt to cover, on the one hand, mineral exploration and development, so everything that happens before a mine goes into operations, and a draft standard for responsible mineral processing. So to look at any standalone mineral processing operations where there isn't a mine site on the same site, to also cover part of the downstream separation and transformation. And realizing that a great amount of chapters, issues, topics covered by the 3 standards was the same. A decision has been made to actually integrate them and have one unified, streamlined draft standards for responsible mining and mineral processing. So this is this orange cover on the right-hand side that you probably have seen by now. If we go to the next slide, I'll say just a bit more about this draft, this orange cover. What is it? First of all, this is not a final board-approved standard. It is a draft, and more importantly, this is really an invitation from IRMA, from our board, for everybody to comment, to reflect on all content. So not just the requirements and the criteria themselves, but also the approach, the articulation of, continuous or operationalization of continuous improvement, critical requirements, etc. Everything is really open for change and recommendations. To make it meaningful and easier for people to navigate, we have included a lot of notes. So at the beginning of each chapter, there is a summary of the changes that are proposed, and in some cases, an explanation of why why a new chapter is being proposed. And then at the requirement levels, under pretty much every single requirement, there are detailed notes with, again, the content of the change, the nature of the change that is proposed, and the rationale, and really linking this back to what I explained before, all these opportunities to add clarity, to remain up to date, to add consistency, or to fill gaps. This is explained also at the requirement level. And also what you will find in blue throughout the document are a number of key consultation questions. I have said that everything is up for comment and recommendation. That is absolutely true. Please feel free to, comment and suggest uh, improvement or changes on everything. But we have pulled out a number of very challenging, sometimes controversial issues that have been raised, over the last 5 years, and that we would really love, in particular, feedback from you to resolve them and find ways to address them in a satisfying way. We have also an Excel version of the draft standard, the entire draft standard, for those of you who prefer using a tabular format. And finally, the whole draft standard, so the full text, everything, the notes, the questions, has been translated into Spanish. So you can also find this on our website under the resources section of the website. So this draft has been informed by a number of things. I mentioned it earlier. We really want to make this standard even more auditable. It was really instrumental to reflect and take into account and learn from all the IRMA independent audits that have been taking place. So you may know that we have already published 4 independent audit reports. We have 16 more in the pipeline with, I think, 3 or 4 that are due to publication very, very soon in the coming days or weeks, actually. So that was very, very important. So to learn not only from the auditing firms, but also from the implementing companies and all the stakeholders who were involved in these processes, as it is a key component of the audit process and audit system. We've also been reviewing other standards that relate to responsible mining, responsible mineral exploration or processing, either existing standards that have been evolving and also new and emerging standards. We've looked at how best practice and society's expectations have been evolving as well. We've taken into account all the comments we received on these 2 draft standards that we published in 2021 that looked at exploration, development, and mineral processing. Of course, we've been learning from our ongoing stakeholder engagement activities, and we also convened a number of expert working groups again in 2022, and we still have a few working groups working as we speak. The public consultation period is still open. It started at the end of October when we released the draft for public comment. This is a 90-day comment period, so you still have basically 1 more week until the end of next week to participate. All comments are being considered and will be considered in an equal and objective manner. And we will publish a public summary once the public comment period is over and we've looked at the comments to include all the comments that we receive and our our response and how we propose to address them or integrate them into a finalized version. Your comments may be treated in a confidential way, in particular if you don't want your name and your affiliation to appear in such a public summary. So you only need to indicate that when you send your contribution, please. This is quite important. So today, that would be in using the Q&A function. And again, inviting you to already share or send comments or questions if you have as I go along. So with the Q&A, you have this confidential option. And then if we go to the next slide, you'll see that on the online platform that we built for this particular purpose, there's also an option for you. You can tick an option that reads, send anonymous or my comment should be considered confidential. On the platform, you can really browse through every single chapter. You can send comments at a requirement level, answer some specific consultation questions only. So it's really I think the most user-friendly and preferred channel for you to go log in and submit your contributions. And there's also a section at the very bottom where you can send general or high-level comments if you don't have comments on a particular chapter or topic. And if we go to the next slide, you'll see we have other maybe more traditional communication channels. We have a dedicated email address, so you can send your contributions and comments to comments@responsiblemining.net anytime. And alternatively, you can use our WhatsApp line and our physical address. So now, when it comes to the management of physical stability, so this is a new chapter that we're proposing to add, and I'll be sharing an overview of the mechanics and the content. And again, inviting you all, if you've had a chance to, read the draft standard already and, you have questions or suggestions or feedback that you want to share with IRMA, feel free to use the chat and the Q&A anytime. So as I said, this is a new chapter. So in the IRMA 2018 version of the standard for responsible mining, there isn't a chapter called Management of Physical Stability, even though there are some requirements that do touch on the physical stability, and I'll say more in the next slide. But you see, the objective of this chapter is to ensure that companies manage wastes, materials, and facilities in a manner that minimizes their short and long-term physical risks and protect workers as well as the human rights, health, and safety of communities and future land and water users. This chapter is potentially applicable to all exploration, mining, and mineral processing projects and operations. Not all requirements will be relevant in all cases, and we have a guidance on that I'll be mentioning later on. But basically, as soon as facilities or infrastructures are being built and managed and maintained, most of this chapter become applicable to a site. If we go to the next slide, and this slide is actually it's if you attended the session on Tuesday on waste and materials management, or back in December, we also did cover these chapters. They really are they go together. But we are developing a new chapter to serve this new approach that I already mentioned on Tuesday. So in the responsible mining standard, the 2018 version, the one that is currently in force, the main emphasis when it comes to waste management and material management is on mine waste. So namely tailings, waste rock, spent ore from heap leaches, and also any waste and residues that are output of the mineral processing operations when you have integrated site where both the mining and the mineral processing take place. So you can apply the IRMA standard, the 2018 version, but there wasn't a lot of attention paid to the input chemicals that go into the processing, also the chemical constituents and the potential pollutants of brines, fuels, other substances that are present. And there was also very little attention paid to non-mine waste. So any other waste that are generated, and when we talk about, very large, complex operations such as industrial mines or industrial, processing facilities or complexes, they can be generated in considerable volumes, such as, used oil, garbage, construction waste, etc. So we had one chapter on waste that was largely focusing on tailings, clearly. And that chapter covered both the sort of risk identification, management, transport, handle of mine waste, including tailings. And there were some requirements in that chapter on tailings storage facilities, tailings dams, and waste ponds, etc. So there was a combination of uh, uh, the management of all the sort of chemical and physical risks associated with just these materials and waste, and the management of the any facilities that be on site to store them and manage them. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see that we're proposing to separate these two. So to have on the one hand the management of the chemicals and the potential pollution related aspects of waste. So this is the sort of reorganized, revised chapter on waste and materials management, and then creating a new chapter, the management of physical stability, where here we take all the existing requirements on tailing storage facilities, tailings dams included. We put them into this new chapter and we expand it to also evaluate and manage the physical stability risks of all facilities and not only mine waste and tailing storage facilities. And at the same time, the chapter on waste and materials management, we are also making sure, proposing to expand the scope a little bit to address, the other elements that I mentioned before on non-mine waste and also on potentially hazardous materials that are not waste. So this new chapter is organized to flow like many other chapters that are similar, that regarding social and environmental issues. So this is for us also an opportunity to be consistent throughout the standard, where you will first find the requirements that relate to risk scoping and risk identification for all the facilities that are present on site, and then that will allow you to define which are the non-critical facilities and the one that are critical, and then uh, this will then inform the other parts of the chapters where you have all the requirements that are linked to the management of non-critical facilities and their physical stability. And then when it comes to critical facilities, you have two subsections or criterion. One on the initial, assessment of critical facilities, the siting and location and the design, and then going into the actual management of the physical stability risks. At these critical facilities, we have all the requirements around the oversight, review, monitoring, and evaluation of these critical facilities. And finally, we have a number of requirements around reporting and public disclosure of information. I mentioned in the introduction, when I mentioned the importance of IRMA to add consistency and be consistent throughout the standard, that is also our intent to articulate and reflect um, good uh, management systems approach and continuous improvement models. And here, I've been using this chart in pretty much all the live consultations because it really do apply to all the chapters. And so one very common way to operationalize continuous improvement for any sector is to embed this plan, do, check, act uh, cycle. And if we click one more time, you'll see how these different sections that I mentioned do map and are aligned with this concept to deliver continuous improvement. So all the initial risk scoping, assessment, design of both critical and non-critical facilities go into the planning part of the cycle. Then this informs the do part where you actually do develop and implement, the management plans of non-critical and critical facilities. There is this need for the regular and ongoing check. So you have all the oversight, monitoring, and evaluation parts of the chapter, and then taking responsive and corrective actions based on this monitoring and checking. This is where the act happens, and all the requirements under the review processes will find their spot there. And then finally, if we click one more time, we also added in the middle, which is a very strong and important dimension of IRMA, the IRMA system in general, to have this transparency dimension. And this is where the requirements on reporting and public disclosure are important. Now, if we go to the next slide, in terms of the content, one thing that was very important for us to take into account is the global industry standard for tailings management that was released in 2020 as a result of a 2-year multi-stakeholder effort led mainly by ICMM, the Industry Association, but together with UNEP and PRI. IRMA, took part in these discussions. We were involved at different levels in this process, and there is quite some overlap between what's in this global industry standard for tailings and what is in the IRMA standard when it comes to tailings. And that's really so it's one thing to acknowledge, but also to realize that, the global standard for tailings only focuses on tailings, the management of tailings, and for most part, only to new tailings facilities, which is, um, I think, one limitation of the standard. And it's also, much narrower. It wasn't the intent of the global standards to cover everything. It was really clear in the beginning, whereas the IRMA standard has this, very comprehensive and robust scope with 26 chapter in the 2018 version. So that said, looking at what the global standard on tailing proposes, it was very important for IRMA to also identify how we can complement the work that is being done by the global tailing standard, and also the work that others are doing on tailings, such as the Mining Association of Canada in their Towards Sustainable Mining Tailings Protocol, and see how we can align on important requirements, also apply them in a manner that do cover the needs of all stakeholders, provides more transparency, can be applied and implemented regardless of your membership status or affiliation. And the intent of this chapter is also to recognize that there are a number of facilities at a mine site, at a mineral processing site, that are not just tailings facilities. They can have risks. They can result in catastrophes. They can also result in, less severe but still damaging stability failures or incidents, and then they need to be recognized and addressed. This is quite a gap when you look at most responsible mining or mining-related standards and norms and initiatives, which is why we're proposing to add it here to really fill a gap. If we go to the next slide, you'll see that, by doing this review of the current standard, the IRMA standard for responsible mining, everything that relates to physical stability risks, again, we realized and identified a few gaps. The determination and identification of facilities that may have a potential for catastrophic failure wasn't quite covered, and there is no explicit requirement on the process to determine a failure consequence classification, which is, I think, one of the great things that is enshrined in the global industry standard for tailings, is to have a rating of the severity of the consequence on people, environment, economies, if a facility were to experience a catastrophic failure. So not a risk likelihood and a classification that is based on the risk, but a classification that is based on the consequences. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see that we are proposing a number of requirements to scope and assess the levels of risk and the critical risks. So that's the whole 4.x.1 criterion. If we go to the next slide, you'll see that we are proposing to include an explicit requirement that outlines the process to determine and review the failure consequence classification. This is really in line with the global industry standard and all that multi-stakeholder work that went into this classification. To also add consistency in terms of management systems while filling gaps, we're proposing quite a comprehensive set of requirements to manage all potential risks, and that include an annex of mitigation and design criteria. So when you say all potential risks, this is where potentially you open a Pandora's box for auditors. How can we know that, how can one know that all the potential risks were identified, taken into account, and are managed subsequently? It's complicated. So one way to do this is to have an annex that actually lists everything, have a comprehensive list that auditors can refer to and see if a site, an operator, has been taking them into account. So we have this Annex 4.x A, which is new. Again, this is something we would really like to have your comments and feedback on. And here we list all the aspects of physical stability and the best practices that go with around the stability analysis, stormwater, conveyances, ditches, access roads, when it comes to high walls and associated facilities and infrastructures for surface mines, for underground mines, underground fluid extraction, storing and stockpiling wastes, waste storage facilities that are associated with mineral processing, chemical processing, etc., and also water reservoirs as potentially, huge and risk-prone facilities on site. We're also proposing to include enhanced quality control, monitoring, maintenance, and oversight of facilities with critical risk. So strengthening the the range of actions and monitoring that need to take place for critical facilities. If we go to the next slide, we have also elaborated more on the need and requirement for documentation and external reporting and public data sharing. Here was a list of sort of minimum criteria and elements that need to be included in data sharing. And we're proposing to add a requirement for all the entity and the operators to provide assistance to stakeholders from affected communities, to select and hire independent experts to advise them on physical stability risks in order to facilitate effective stakeholder engagement. This is something that you will find throughout the IRMA standard, which is already in the 2018 mining standard, but we are, I think, strengthening and also streamlining in across various chapters, in particular some of the most technical chapters, talking about the physical stability of infrastructures and facilities is quite of a niche interest, and it may be hard for stakeholders to grasp all the ins and outs. And so this is why, if you want the stakeholder engagement to be meaningful and effective on such a technical topic, there is a need to make sure that assistance can be technical assistance can be provided and facilitated. If we go to the next slide, you'll see here that in terms of the alignment of this new chapter with the global industry standard on tailings. So you see here how so on the right hand side you see the related references, so all the sort of individual indicators from the tailing standards, how a number of requirements in the new draft are aligned partially or fully with tailing standards. But you see also, so where we could align and make sure we actually operationalize these requirements into the IRMA system, we did. But there are also a number of requirements that are not covered in the tailing standard. In particular, everything that relates to non-critical facilities and not facilities that are not tailing storage facilities, and also in terms of the sort of the risk scoping and the management aspects, where we are going, I think, slightly beyond what's in the tailing standard. That's, I think, very important for you. Those of you who will be, using or navigating also the tailing standard. And I'm happy to share, this document if you need it. Another document that I wanted to mention here today is the applicability guidance. We have a full document that you can also find on the IRMA website under resources. Because now that we have one integrated standard, we're proposing to have one integrated standard to cover exploration into project development, into operational mines and standalone mineral processing operations. It's very important to have this guidance for all stakeholders, in particular implementing companies, and see which requirements are actually applicable to which stage and which phase of this development and supply chain. So you see on the right-hand side, you've got these different, key phases from the very early exploration. So stage 1, it's desk-based, desktop exploration work, into exploration stage 2, where there is some, preliminary stakeholder engagement on the ground. There might be some aerial or terrestrial preliminary exploration work. Into stage 3, the project development per se, the permitting phase, and then the operational stage of a mine or a mineral processor. And you see here how gradually more and more requirements become potentially applicable. Again, depending on the context and the setup, and largely, based on the scoping of risk that is becomes mandatory as soon as exploration stage 3, and then depending on if there are facilities with low or uh, um, uh, um, low or significant failure consequence, but no potential loss of life. So these are the sort of non-critical facilities. And then a number of criteria are there for not applicable if you only have non-critical facilities. If you have facilities that are identified with significant failure consequences, that include potential loss of life. So from the loss of one life, it becomes a critical facility, and facilities with higher consequences classifications, then you have all the requirement become applicable. And then clearly, if you have a combination of non-critical and critical facilities, add aside the whole chapter is potentially applicable. This guidance is a guidance. It's also open for comments, so don't hesitate if you have suggestion or feedback. But what I wanted to say, it doesn't prevent a company from engaging in the normal process if it is interested in engaging into the IRMA system. And in this process protocol, there will be a sort of collective work and reflection together with the audit firm, IRMA, the operator, to define the scope of what are the applicable requirements based on the evidence that can be produced by the operator. In terms of the number of requirements, in the 2018 standard, we have 28 requirements in this chapter on waste and materials management, which, as I said before, is a combination of both the management of waste and materials and the management of the facilities to store waste. Now that we have separated it out into 2 chapters, you see that the number is going, a lot higher. So in this new draft, we have 24 requirements on the waste and materials management chapter, so the revised chapter where we've taken out all the stability related requirements, and we have 28 requirements in this brand new chapter that we're proposing. So this may look like a lot new requirements, but if we go to the next slide, you'll see that in practice, this chapter on physical stability, even though it has 28 requirements, it includes only 6 new elements, so 6 brand new dimensions that are not covered in the 2018 standard. This is the coverage of non-mine waste facilities. So this is new. The thorough scoping of facilities to understand the stability risk. This is expanded and it's actually new. It was a gap in the 2018 standard. The consequence classification approach is new. The requirement on information sharing with affected communities and relevant stakeholders is also new. The process for change management is also new when there are changes occurring in the design, operation, or maintenance of a facility. How do you deal with that? This is also new. This was a gap in the 2018 standard. And the oversight of the engineering work quality for all critical facilities is also a new requirement. But again, pretty much all of these, apart from the non-mine waste facilities, are covered in the, well, covered or addressed in the global tailings standards. So we've, as I said, we really benefited from this sort of renewed dialogue and multi-stakeholder work on tailings. as well as, other standards and our stakeholders informing our reflection on tailings. If we go to the next slide, I'll be sharing with you a few of the key consultation questions that you will find in this chapter. Again, really inviting you, if you have more questions, I think we've addressed some of them already, but if you want to use the Q&A and the chat, you can use that anytime. We still have time to address them. So if you haven't seen the consultation questions, or if you wanted clarification on them, I'll be sharing some now. Well, first of all, this is a new approach. So uh, splitting up into two chapters, uh, we think adds clarity between management of waste and materials on the one hand, and the management of the physical stability of all facilities on the other hand. This is also wider scope. We're covering more than what's covered in the 2018 standard. What do you think? Do you agree? Do you think this is not adequate? Do you think we could, do things differently? That these chapters shouldn't be separate? Again, all feedback and reflections are welcome. If we go to the next slide, when it comes to the guidance on best practice for design and management, so I mentioned that in particular in relation to with the audit process. This was the approach we are proposing. And do you agree that, this guidance to inform the work of the auditors is a good thing? We have that also in other chapters, and I'm thinking of, land pollution, water management, where we have this kind of guidance to help the auditors and know whether all the elements have been taken into account and best practices implemented. If you don't think that is the right approach, that is a good approach, how would you suggest auditors determine whether or not a site has taken the sufficient measures to prevent or mitigate physical instability? So that's really that's a very challenging question. Having an annex or guidance can solve part of it, but it also has limitations. So again, would welcome your comment on that. And if we go to the next slide, first I see that there's a terminology question. So someone saying this is a very important chapter. Is there a clear definition for facility, to ensure that nothing of relevance is excluded from the self-assessment and the on-site audit? The same for critical, non-critical, and catastrophic failure. We do have, this is a very good question. This is very important, especially when it comes to audit, to make sure this is done in a rigorous and consistent way, also from one side to another. We have a definition for facility. So associated facility with the site. I can read it out. You can find them in the draft standard. So all the key terms and definitions, you can find them at a chapter level. So at the end of every chapter, there are the key definitions. And also at the very end of the draft standard, you have the full glossary. So any facility owned or managed by the entity, that would not have been constructed, expanded, or acquired, but for the project operation, and without which the project would not be viable. Examples included. No, sorry, this is associated facilities. So all facilities that are not owned by the site. So we have a definition for facility. So refers to any land, building, installation, structure, equipment, conveyance, or area that alone or together serve a particular purpose. In the IRMA standard, the term may be associated with a specific type of facility that is self-described, such as, tailings facility. But other examples of facilities are open pits, access roads, water dams, waste disposal sites, underground mine workings, beneficiation plants, brine ponds, slag piles, etc. We have updated this definition to be more descriptive already, but again, if you have recommendation or feedback on how we could make it um, clearer, I know, having this etc. Maybe not satisfactory all the time. So if you want us to add more practical examples, we're very open to it. The critical and non-critical elements or terms are defined in the actual chapter. So it was also one thing here that we think was important to define and articulate somehow, slightly more than what you will find in the global standards for tailings. But again, you will find these definitions. We're very happy to hear your comments and feedback. I'll just see if they're not too long. I can read them out. Yeah, so I mean, critical and non-critical. A critical facility is a facility that has a high, very high, or extreme failure consequence classification, or a significant consequence classification that includes potential loss of life. And then the consequence classification, the failure consequence classification is detailed in the standard. And there's also a definition. And here we've really, built on a number of sources, including the work of the global standards, which itself was informed by the work of, for example, the British Columbia government classification interpretation guideline, and others. So we take this, very seriously. You are absolutely right. Definitions are essential and key. Please, I invite you to, have a look at what's in the draft. If you think we can further improve them, we'll be very happy to do so. Just a few more things. We still have a bit more time. If you have more questions, feedback, please use the chat Q&A anytime. But regarding existing facilities, and especially tailings facilities that are already there, in the global standard, the global industry standard, there are allowances for sites where they can demonstrate that they actually cannot upgrade a tailings storage facility, a tailings dam, to the best practice design criteria, because this is not viable. They can't do it, cannot be retroactively applied based on the context. This requires strong and clear evidence that this is not possible. For example, that it would actually create additional stability risks. And so in the global industry standard, what is required in those cases to demonstrate that there are still upgrades that are made to minimize the risk to as low as reasonably practicable a LARP. In the IRMA standard, this is not the case at the moment. We don't have such allowance. It's just there's a requirement to align and demonstrate if you want to score, the highest and meet fully meet the requirements to upgrade to the best practice design criteria. But do you think that we should, as with the global industry standard, allow for these particular context or situations? If we go to the next slide, you'll see that one of the way we propose, and you'll find that in the draft. So all the consultation questions are, clearly and explicitly mentioned in the draft. we are thinking, if we go that way on that route that the global industry standard has taken, potentially IRMA could cap a site's rating for a requirement, so you would never be able to fully meet the requirement on, demonstrating best practice design on a facility, but you might still get a partial score. Again, from a continuous improvement perspective, so that sites that are doing, more than nothing are also able to be rewarded for it. What do you think? Is it an approach that you support, that you think makes sense? Again, very happy to hear your comments and suggestion on that. So this was, some examples, a selection of the consultation question that you will find in the draft standard. If we go to the next slide, I'll just, recap the different ways that are still open for you until the end of next week to contribute, the dedicated online platform, our email address, comments@responsiblemining.net. You can, send us content anytime, and alternatively, our WhatsApp line in our physical address. If you need a little bit more time, please do get in touch. We'll be very happy to see, if we can accommodate a little bit if you need extra time to prepare and finalize your recommendation and submission. I'll thank you very much for your attention and for being with us today. If you want to watch other sessions, webinars on other topics, they are all available on our website and our YouTube channel. Thank you very much. Have a good rest of the day. Take care.